Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're immersing ourselves in a piece of American history that honestly it reads like an epic tragedy. We're tracking the journey from the perceived glamour of the Roaring Twenties straight into the crushing reality of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl.
And this isn't history from a distance, not from Washington, D.C. or Wall Street. Our sources today give us this extraordinary, really intimate view through the eyes of one family. We follow their fight for survival, their migration west, and we see the immense personal and social forces that really define that whole era.
So our mission is pretty simple. We want to stop just reading the plot and start extracting the analytical gold. What were the mechanisms of exploitation? How did societal expectations trap people even before the drought hit? And what does true resilience look like when everything from the economy to the weather conspires to break you?
We're really looking for those crucial nuggets about sacrifice, about systemic failure, and sort of the rebirth of the American spirit in the face of all that.
Okay, let's unpack this. We begin in Dalhart, Texas. It's the late 1920s, and we meet the character who really anchors this entire narrative, Elsa Wolcott.
Right. And the most important thing to grasp about Elsa's starting point is just her complete isolation. She's 25, which, at that time, society saw that as, well, your prospects were rapidly diminishing.
Right. She was basically seen as an old maid.
Exactly. And her family has essentially sidelined her. They forced her to quit school at 14, citing these vague medical concerns about her heart. And they're constantly making her feel awkward and unattractive. She's just confined to her room trying to disappear.
And this is where the socioeconomic context gets so interesting.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just about one constrained woman. It's about the deep, deep contrast between the promise of the Roaring Twenties and the reality of rural, restrictive Texas. Dalhart was booming, right?
Absolutely. New water towers, automobiles replacing buggies. The farmers were getting rich, growing wheat for the war effort. The economic machinery was modern, but the social machinery that was stuck in the Victorian age.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So Elsa is sitting in her room, and she's imagining this age of bathtub gin and ragtime music for the men. But her reality, what she's told, is her role is to stay quiet and out of sight.
She is completely excluded from the prosperity and the perceived liberation of the decade. Her inner life, though, that's a direct rebellion against all of it.
And this is where literature plays this fascinating, almost explosive role. We find her reading two very different novels, and they perfectly frame her internal struggle. First up is The Age of Innocence.
Right, which awakens this intense awareness of time just slipping away and this profound, unexpressed longing. And it's so telling she was reading in that particular book, a novel specifically about the suffocating social rules of Gilded Age society.
So it instantly frames her rebellion. It's not just against her parents, it's against these outdated societal structures that are still clinging to life in the supposedly progressive 1920s.
Exactly. And then she finds the other book, the truly scandalous one, Memoirs of a Woman of Pleasure. And that's a powerful catalyst. It gives shape to her restlessness and creates what the sources call a frightening, sinful need to touch herself.
So that literary exposure, it forces her hand. But the emotional scaffolding for what she does next comes from a really surprising place. Her late grandpa, Walt.
Yeah, he was a difficult man, described as blustery, given to drink and arguing. But he was the only one who consistently took her side.
And he gave her this powerful guiding principle that really defines her entire future arc.
Don't worry about dying, Elsa. Worry about not living. Be brave. That phrase is basically her permission slip to defy everything she knows. She resolves to find that grit in herself, even if it means risking absolutely everything.
So her first act of rebellion is physical. It's immediate. She goes down to the general store, buys this bright red silk, a color she'd never, ever been allowed to wear, and she sews a daring modern flapper dress, a total rejection of the sack-like clothing and forced invisibility her mother imposed on her.
But let's pause there for a second. She makes this huge symbolic leap toward independence. And then she immediately tests it. She goes to the local speakeasy, gives the password.
And the door slams shut.
The door slams shut. The storekeeper, Frank, he recognizes her. And he just refuses her entry, telling her that only trouble comes of it.
That failure is such a huge analytical nugget. It tells you that in rural Texas, the liberation promised by the Roaring Twenties was, for many, an illusion, especially for women from established traditional families. The social constraints were just stronger than the economic boom.
Our world is momentarily shut down, yeah.
Yeah.
But then, just outside the courthouse, she encounters the source of her future upheaval, Elsa Martinelli.
Described as tall and lanky, and crucially, the son of Italian immigrants. which immediately signals to the community that he is
Uh,
other.
Right. And the encounter is instant. It's physical. That moment in the back of the truck, beneath the moonlight, it's her first taste of being recognized, of being desired. The source says it was an opportunity she'd never really imagined, and she realizes in that moment she's willing to pay any price to feel alive.
And that one moment, that recognition, it causes the ultimate upheaval. Because when her pregnancy is revealed, her parents are, they're just mortified. By the sin, of course, but also, crucially, by the source of the sin, Rafe.
Whom her father instantly dismisses with this virulent nativism as an Italian.
That prejudice is so vital for context here. I mean, even as Delhart prospered, the Wolcotts, who saw themselves as established Americans, they treated the Martinellis as fundamentally inferior
And
immigrants.
Elsa is immediately disowned. She's seen as a ruinous shame, which just highlights that the moral code of the time prioritized social standing over family.
So she's forced into the Martinelli family, and at first, the in-laws, Tony and Rose, they react with hostility.
Oh yeah. Rose yells puttana at her, the Italian for whore, which signifies just utter disgrace. But they're also practical people, bound by this old world sense of honor, and so they negotiate the marriage.
But this is where Elsa's identity truly shifts. This is the moment. She stops being the constrained daughter and becomes the fierce mother. She looks at the life growing inside her and calls it a miracle.
She accepts she'll marry a man who didn't love her, but she demands that her child will be loved. She challenges Rose directly, stating, "I won't do that to my child," because she knows firsthand the pain of withheld affection.
And she agrees to convert to Catholicism, accepting a life of estrangement, all for the sake of her baby.
And she just throws herself into this new life, a life rooted in the land. Tony, her father-in-law, he embodies this old-world wisdom about connection to the soil. He explains that the land tells the family's story, connecting them across generations. He even grows grapes from Sicilian cuttings, tying their heritage directly to the Texas dirt.
And Elsa finds this unexpected strength in that commitment. She develops what's described as a nearly bottomless capacity for love. For the farm, for her in-laws, and even for Rafe. Her pride becomes visible in the root cellar and the jars of preserved fruits and vegetables. She finally belongs somewhere.
Yeah, she's tied to labor and provision, not to status or her perceived beauty. The Martinelli family culture is grounded, it's resilient, it's defined by their winter routines of cleaning, sewing, reading stories. But Rafe himself remains the disruptive, unstable element in all of that.
Oh, absolutely. He's restless, prone to nightmares, always smells of wine or whiskey. He's constantly dreaming of escaping this grounded existence for the glamour of Hollywood or New York.
And that duality of Rafe is a major theme throughout these early years. He was the catalyst for her liberation. He gave her that initial spark of life. But he is also a profound source of pain and instability. He embodies that restless American yearning for more.
Which stands in sharp contrast to Tony's grounded generational commitment to the soil.
Exactly. And when their first daughter, Loretta, is born, Rose presents Elsa with the family talisman. It's an American penny found on the street in Sicily, and it's imprinted with 2 wheat shafts. They believe this coin symbolized their destiny, a destiny tied to wheat farming. This is their coin of hope.
And the symbolism there is just palpable. In the late 1920s, those wheat shafts meant prosperity, fulfillment. But as we move into the 1930s, that symbol of destiny, it quickly turns into this agonizing irony.
The story marks 1930, around Loretta's 8th birthday, as the memory of the last good crop. That's the psychological marker of the impending decline.
And that decline was catastrophic. By the early 1930s, you have years of unrelenting drought combined with the nationwide economic devastation of the Great Depression.
And all that excessive plowing from the prosperous years meant the land was completely unsecured. The Great Plains were a powder keg, just waiting for a match.
The national context is so critical here, too. You have millions out of work, and the big city newspapers, they just didn't bother covering the drought that was destroying the heartland.
So this compounding disaster environmental ruin, combined with economic invisibility, left farmers like Tony feeling utterly abandoned.
And their reaction was this mix of fierce pride and desperation. They wanted rain, not the dole. They saw charity as shameful.
The drought wasn't their fault, right?
Yeah.
They had done the hard work, but they couldn't control the climate. So they refused government handouts because it violated their deeply held belief in self-reliance.
The physical toll on the land is described in just devastating, granular detail. Lonesome Tree, their town, becomes a ghost town. The hat shop, the apothecary, the soda fountain, all boarded up. The people look parched as the ground.
And Tony, the man whose entire identity was tied to the soil, is seen grieving, just scooping the dry earth into his calloused hands.
So the family's coping mechanisms, they start to fracture under this relentless stress.
Right. Rose, the devout Catholic, she increases the number of altars and crucifixes, just desperately doubling down on prayer. And Rafe, he retreats further into drinking. He calls it the only thing keeping him sane, and he's obsessing over maps and newspapers, using them as adventure novels to fuel his mental escape.
And Elsa is caught right in the middle. Her parents' critical voice is still ringing in her head, making her feel awkward and unattractive. This contributes to her silence, her withdrawal, even though she has this bottomless capacity for love.
She can't stand up to Rafe because she's terrified of losing his already frayed affection. She believes, deep down, that she doesn't deserve any better.
And this internal turmoil, it just poisons her relationship with her daughter. Loretta, who's now 12, she internalizes Rafe's escapist idealism.
She starts seeing her father and herself as bright stars who needed to shine, while judging her mother as a dour workhorse who was sucking the life out of everyone. Loretta completely adopts Rafe's dream of travel. She wants to be a famous writer like Nellie Bly.
And this adolescent anger, this harsh judgment, it resurrects all of Elsa's childhood insecurities. So Elsa withdraws even further, fearing Loretta saw the same lack in Elsa that her own family had seen. Yeah. It's just this agonizing, self-perpetuating cycle of emotional isolation, even as the farm is literally crumbling around them.
The breaking point for the marriage comes as the storms intensify, and Rafe confesses the tragic truth. He didn't marry her out of love. He just wanted to be somewhere else that first night in the truck. He laments that the wind and drought will kill them all.
And he leaves. He leaves Loretta, his bright star, a flyer for California, the mythical land of milk and honey. He gets on a train, doesn't even tell Elsa, just asked her to remember me then. A heartbreaking reference to their first night, which was about freedom, not commitment.
And Loretta is furious. She immediately blames her mother. You drove him away. But she hides her devastation from her younger brother and by reframing the whole thing as an adventure.
But then comes the final, devastating blow. And it isn't economic, it's physical. The worst dust storm hits, a 9-day monster, with dust raining down from the ceiling. And the real horror lands on Ant, their younger son, who develops this violent cough.
He's struggling to breathe, even with a gas mask. The doctor later confirms he's suffering from severe silicosis, or dust pneumonia. It's caused by the prairie dust, full of silica, just tearing at the air sacs in his young lungs.
Seeing him seizing, his fingers curling into claws, that is the definitive realization for Elsa. The land is actively trying to kill her son.
And this changes everything, especially in the context of the CCC visits. Hugh Bennett from FDR's Civilian Conservation Corps had been there, offering farmers pay not to grow crops, suggesting they plant grass. And Tony rejected it. He believed in self-reliance, refused the charity. But now the decision isn't about pride anymore. It's about life and death.
Seeing Ant in that state, Elsa finally declares, "We need to leave Texas." And Rose, the stalwart defender of the land, agrees immediately. Even Tony, realizing the land was dying, he concedes.
The commitment to the soil that had defined their entire heritage had become a death trap. So Elsa now faces the loss of her entire life, the life she built on love and labor. She plants her cherished aster, this small, final symbol of hope, in the dirt in front of her deceased son Lorenzo's grave, realizing all the family graves would soon be lost to the wind.
She accepts that the old ideals, land and family rooted in one place, they did not endure here. The survival of her living children was all that mattered now.
And the logistics of leaving, they were just desperate. It highlights the scale of their poverty. They sell the 2 remaining cows to the government for just $32.
$32. Unbelievable.
They pack a few necessary things, a stove, a copper tub, some mats. And here Elsa returns to Grandpa Walt's second piece of advice.
Be brave. Or pretend to be. It's all the same.
Exactly. And that's a powerful distinction. She doesn't feel brave. She decides to act brave for her children. It's a calculated deception, masking her absolute terror. But it becomes the foundation of her true, later courage.
But the journey west is immediately terrifying. It confirms that the darkness now comes from man, not just nature. They encounter desperately poor people dragging wagons, including a former lawyer, Tom, who's heading to California on foot.
And on their very first night, they're attacked by thieves trying to steal their gas. Elsa pulls a gun and yells, and she drives them away.
And that act, it just shatters the last of Loretta's innocence. She sees the danger, the fear in her mother's eyes. When they finally arrive in California, they see the cultivated fields, the orange and olive trees of the San Joaquin Valley. a lush, jarring contrast to the barren plains they left behind.
They expected salvation.
And they found prejudice.
Immediate prejudice.
Yeah.
And this is the next systemic hurdle they face. They're immediately marginalized with the Okie label, even though they were from Texas. And the story makes it clear this label was a tool of discrimination. It was used to enforce the idea that the problem wasn't the economy or the drought, but the people themselves, that they were poor, dirty, a threat.
We see it play out right away. A storekeeper pulls a gun on Elsa, demands she pay with cash, not credit. A wealthy woman refuses to rent to them, claiming her husband wouldn't tolerate Okies, and even calls Elsa a vagrant.
So they settle in the ditch bank camp near the fictional town of Welty. The sources describe it as a squatter camp. 100 tents and hovels cobbled together from scrap metal built on mud ruts near an irrigation ditch full of fetid water.
So they learn very quickly about dysentery, about the need to boil and strain the ditch water. This is a new man-made environment of poverty, and it's far more insidious than the drought.
And here we get to the core economic insight of the migrant experience, the debt trap. The company store at the Welty Farms camp charges these exorbitant price-picking sacks were priced 3 times higher than in town and demanded credit only. This system ensured workers could never, ever pay down their debt. It's forced labor disguised by wages.
It strips them not just of money, but of dignity and hope. They realize pretty quickly there is no way to get ahead, no way to get out by working hard. Hard work, their most cherished value, is actively being penalized by this system.
But Elsa, who's now operating fully as the warrior mother, she begins fighting back, and she starts with dignity through education. At the local school, she faces this immediate hostility from administrators who call them squatters and Okies.
And Elsa has to assert her intelligence, her standing, emphasizing we are from Texas and that she is literate.
And this struggle for dignity begins to heal her relationship with Loretta. Loretta finds refuge in literature. She gets a library card, a potent symbol of hope and a future beyond the camp. And she recognizes her mother's silent struggle. So she gives Elsa a journal.
Right, she says, I know you have stuff you need to say, but we're kids, so you stay quiet. I thought maybe writing it down would make you feel better.
Which is just a critical turnaround. Loretta moves from seeing her mother as this dour workhorse to understanding her silent capacity for sacrifice. Elsa is no longer just a figure of endurance. She's a figure of self-control and quiet strength.
And then Elsa makes this powerful public statement. She attends the PTA meeting, wearing her best flour sack dress, trying to integrate, but she's met with open contempt and silence.
But she refuses to retreat. She recalls her mother-in-law's belief. They're bullies. The only way to fight a bully is to stand your ground. So she sits down, she asserts her right to be involved as a parent, refusing to vanish like she did in her childhood home.
That moment is a perfect microcosm of her evolution. She started out unable to get through the door of a speakeasy. Now she refuses to be moved from a PTA meeting. She is finding her voice through defiance.
And the political tension around the camp, it escalates significantly with the introduction of Jack Valen. He's a union organizer. He's described as a rebel, fighting for the down and out, and he's a sharp contrast to Rafe. Jack is a man of action, not just a dreamer.
And he's been physically beaten by the police for his activism?
Which is what radicalized Loretta. She's immediately taken by his message. She reads the Communist Manifesto and attends a secretive town meeting in a barn. She recognizes the economic struggle immediately, defining it as the class struggle, serfs versus landlords, and realizes that while education is vital, direct action is necessary to break the debt trap.
And the growers respond to this rising activism viciously. They successfully bully the state to end commodity relief, the no work, no eat policy, fearing that government aid would allow workers to strike for better wages. It forces the workers' hands, take the exploitative jobs, or starve.
The final straw for Elsa comes during cotton picking season. The combination of overpriced sacks, the low wages, 90 cents for 100 pounds, and the 10% charge to convert chits to cash. It forces the realization there was no way to get ahead, no way to get out. She recognizes the system is fundamentally designed to hold them down.
And this realization, it ignites her full transformation. She explicitly sheds her long-held belief in silence and obedience. She says, all my life I've been told to make no noise, don't want too much, but the way we're treated, it's wrong. This isn't who we are in America.
And she joins the strike. She marches with Jack, moving beyond personal survival into political resistance.
The dramatic climax happens in the field. The pickers march in, refuse to work, and just sit down in solidarity.
And then the vigilantes descend, grower spies, citizens deputized by the local growers, and they start throwing tear gas bombs. Elsa, acting as a leader, she grabs the megaphone and yells, "Run into the fields, not away."
And she's shot. A vigilante shoots her while she's trying to rally the workers. Her final action is the ultimate tragic expression of Grandpa Walt's motto all those years later. She worried about not living with dignity, and chose to be brave in the face of death.
I agree, it's profound courage, but we have to look at the cost of that. Her bravery, while inspiring, was also reckless, and we have to analyze the immediate collateral damage. Loretta sees her mother shot, and she becomes desperate. She realizes the only way to save the family and afford a burial is through crime.
Exactly. The story takes this abrupt, dark turn. Loretta robs the company store that trapped them in debt. She uses her father's shotgun disguise and gets a large sum of money. She calls it a bad thing for a good reason, knowing that money was necessary to ensure her mother's burial and their survival.
And Jack Valen drives the family, Loretta, aunt, and Elsa's coffin across the Mojave Desert. He makes Loretta promise she'll never do anything illegal again, but he acknowledges the moral compromise they were forced into. He says, "The world's topsy-turvy, though." Her mother's heroism instantly forced her daughter into criminality just to survive.
But the strike itself, tragically, was successful. It sealed the workers' resolve. Even as Elsa lay dying, the workers, inspired by her defiance, they filled the fields and just sat quietly, refusing to pick a single boll of cotton. The growers were eventually forced to concede some demands.
The narrative then ends with this powerful glimpse into the future, set in 1940. The Great Plains had recovered, thanks in part to the New Deal's soil conservation plans. The fields were now a sea of golden wheat, the very image of hope that the talisman penny had always promised.
Rose attributes the recovery to God and his reign.
Of course. And Elsa is buried in the family cemetery back in Texas, her headstone defined by a single powerful word:
Warrior. Loretta holds her mother's journal, lamenting that she never told her mother that her courage would always guide me. She keeps her mother's love alive in moments remembered and moments imagined.
And that is the true legacy. Loretta, now defined by her mother's strength and resilience, is heading west again. She's carrying the coin of hope, ready for a new future. She is the first Martinelli to go to college, a girl. Elsa's sacrifice achieved the dignity and opportunity she sought for her children, a liberation far greater than any flapper dress could ever have offered.
So let's pull all this together.
Yeah.
Elsa was introduced as a woman defined by her inherited constraints: silent, marginalized, judged. The immense pressure of the Dust Bowl and the Depression, a force that broke so many, it forced her to shed those constraints. She discovered this profound capacity for love, for labor, and finally for radical courage in the cotton fields of California.
And you can connect this directly to the national consciousness of the era. I mean, this story is the realization of themes in FDR's 1936 Fireside Chat, where he praised the American farmers' tenacity and courage, their self-reliance. Elsa's story demonstrates that tenacity and courage were required not just against nature, but against fellow Americans who were benefiting from systemic exploitation.
Her journey takes us from a constrained debutante reading books of longing to a political murder. It highlights that the power of individual choice is most pronounced when external forces, drought, the economy, institutional prejudice, try to dictate your destiny. She found her voice by choosing resistance over silence.
This raises an important question. The source material shows us that the biggest betrayal of the American dream isn't poverty, but the realization that sheer hard work and self-reliance just aren't enough when systemic forces and powerful interests are aligned against you. So, what modern-day systems require us to be silent about injustice, and what price are we willing to pay to find our own warrior voice?
A truly powerful thought to carry with you as you reflect on the price of dignity and the cost of courage. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the indomitable will shown on the Great Plains. We'll see you next time.